Yeah, there's a little distance there to cover, so we're.
Agnes.
Just a question. So I understand that entryway, it's in the, we use the word basement, but there is sunlight, isn't there? Will it be light and airy? I mean, you're not going to feel like you're coming into a basement, are
Well,
you?
this will have windows in it. This will be open through here. We will certainly want to bring this in with some windows and doors and light so that we can bring light into here. Once we're past this point, we're definitely deep
dark.
inside the building, so.
And that front way is secure, so or that would be closed at.
We would want
so
this, I think we want these doors locked that can be released by somebody upstairs.
Okay, and that includes the residents, correct?
Includes the residents, yeah.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
you're gonna have to, I would think, with your resident population and what their abilities are and what they can do or not do, whether they have the ability to let somebody in or not. I think that's
Oh,
gonna
you
be
could
a
control it.
judgment call on your staffing, I would think, to say, I think only the staff should let people in, or some people give family key card and let them just come in at whatever hours that they desire. I mean, there are differing levels of security that different campuses really feel they need to. Some want to leave it open, and
But I think Deerfield, you go in, you click, you buzz for whoever you're visiting.
your
So-
problem here, in this particular scenario, is your problem here is that if you just left it open and it was a door into a household and somebody came in, yes, they'd come in, but they'd come into a household, they would probably run into staff somewhere. The problem with this entry is that they can go anywhere in this whole basement, and we want to know what's going on, because they can get from there, they can get to the support building, they could hide in one of these rooms. I mean, there's just so much that they could get into. And that's what I think you got to be a little bit concerned about in terms of doing that. And the elevator outside in that vestibule, if we want to revisit that for just a moment, that would eliminate that aspect, that you could get into the rest of the building. That's probably its biggest advantage, is you don't have people wandering down through there.
Dan?
Rick, is there a way where you have the yellow shading in the central corridor lines indicating that's where the pathway ends? Can you do some kind of a security wall in the central corridor?
I mean, like
Right,
here?
yep, right there. There, and then on the other side of that, can we
Yeah.
do some kind of a security door that will just prevent people from wandering into
that,
the building?
yeah.
That might be a lower cost option than building an elevator
Sure. Yeah.
for security, and security seems to be the concern here.
Yeah, I think that could certainly be done. That would limit that.
Can that be done aesthetically?
It is a pair of doors.
Right.
I'll just start with that. There are nicer looking doors than others, but it could look nice. It can look nice. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments?
I got just one.
Go ahead.
To do any more would decrease the amount of rooms that we would have available, I believe. No, you could do 2 more, but we'd have to reduce some of the other joint spaces that we use for the clients or residents that are in that facility. So we'd have to lose some of the spaces, like the wellness area or some other spaces for their shared use.
So what is your mix of family care is 36 out of the 40 or 26 out of the
26 out of 36,
26 out of 36?
because we're anticipating, some turning over.
And the family care people probably you can't go into one of these one-bedroom apartments, given the dollar.
Yeah, I wouldn't anticipate that, no.
So if you base that on a ratio, even the private pay, if half of those could go in, then that would be a total of 5 for the whole building. So that puts you at 2.5 or 3. Because I wouldn't anticipate all of them would just
Right.
naturally gravitate to a one-bedroom apartment because frankly, they may only be able to afford the
And the
small
other
one.
thing that we did look at is the potential for husband and wife sharing a unit, and they would, if they were in the one-bedroom apartment, that would be an easier share situation for a husband-wife situation.
Would you consider switching into, instead of having 40?
We could have,
36. That way we still have all the other areas. We have 8 total apartments and out of 36. And that's about the ratio that you were looking at.
Drop down from 40.
Yeah, not from 40. You're giving up 2 rooms per floor, but you're getting 2 more apartments. So you go from 2 out of the 20 to 4 out of 18.
I think that's a really good question, and I think we need to revisit maybe the balance of those 2 unit options. But we also talked about that social room potentially could be your wellness room. Now, I think that would be an absolutely gorgeous wellness room. You could do, maybe stretching, yoga classes or something, because that would the room lends itself to wellness program and activities that we could potentially separate from this building and turns that wellness room back into a unit too. So that's another option.
yeah, right now, the social room doesn't have a purpose.
Right.
So that would be a fairly good purpose for it, because, yeah.
Okay, any further questions, comments?
Decreasing the amount of beds would really be, I think, a decision you guys would make, not, and I think the 40 bed is where people want to be at. So if we could arrange maybe some more one-bedroom apartments and within the 40 bed, we'll look at that.
Yeah, I would think maybe one more per floor might be
Yeah,
okay.
we'll look at that, okay.
Okay. Couple of other things that we wanted to cover. Are we okay moving off of this subject?
Yeah, yep, we're getting to the time anyway, so yeah, move on there.
We just wanted to update you on our efforts in sustainability and the energy. We have been in conversation with Al Bowl from Focus on Energy, and both for the existing and the new construction. And in that conversation, we talked about a couple of things. One is we've applied for design assistance through them, which will help us understand what the potential is of what we could do in terms of additional things we can do to the building or equipment, those kinds of things. We have studied the cost of geothermal and solar hot water heating, and the geothermal would add about $600,000 to the cost of the project, and it's got a 21.7-year payback. And now that could go up or down depending on your soil, and so that's kind of in the middle of what the soil could do depending on the conductivity of that soil. And then we also looked at solar hot water heating, and currently the way that sits, it's $125,000 first cost with a 20-year payback, and that is not as lucrative as it was at one time. We've also studied multiple systems for the mechanical. We've studied the VAV, which is a variable volume system, a large air handler sending out cold air, and then it's adjusted with radiant panels at the rooms, at the exterior walls. a fan coil unit, 4-pipe fan coil, which is sending out hot water or chilled water to a little fan unit with the coils and cooling that way and heating that way. And then we've also studied the heat pump, which is a heat pump that's at each room that we want to zone. You're sending out kind of tempered water, and it's taking heat out of that water or putting heat back into that water to heat and cool that space. The VAV system is a very proven system. It's quiet, it's dependable, it doesn't have a lot of maintenance, and it gives everyone individual control. Typically, it's been a little more expensive than some of the others, depending on who you talk to. And then the 4-pipe fan coil is probably the most expensive. It gives good heat and cooling control all year, but it also heats with air, hot air. And in this instance, any kind of air movement over the residence is felt as a draft, even if it's warm air. So we really shy away from that. The heat pump is a little more efficient than either of the other two, but not a lot, $10,000 or $20,000 a year. 10,000, I think, is where the number was. But again, you're heating and cooling with forced air from that unit, and so it does tend to feel like a draft. The other thing is there is a bit of a noise from both that. There's a compressor in it, so we have to mount that remote from the room a little bit. And I think the biggest thing is the maintenance, because it does have a compressor, it's got a fan, it's got a filter. There's a lot of maintenance that could happen over time, and it's usually in the ceiling above, so it's rather difficult to get to. So given that and some of the discussions we've had, we're focusing on the VAV system throughout the skilled building and the CBRF as well. That would be one consistent system throughout the campus. So that's kind of an update of where we're at mechanically and on the some of the energy considerations that we've been looking at. Any comments, questions? Okay.
I guess I'm wondering, how soon are you needing to make a decision on what type of system that we're going to do?
Well, I'd say within the next couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks.
If that's the case, I'd like to ask Mr. Ellsbury's opinion about what system is looking like would be the preferred system.
Dovetailing with what Rick said, we had contacted Focus on Energy, and they have a brand new system out this year that they brought out to work with the design team. So they actually do a lot more cost analysis in depth on each system. But given the amount of maintenance and labor costs to take care of the individual units, and plus if we put them all in at the same time, chances are when we got to replace them, we're replacing them all at the same time. And that's not something I really want to jump into, and it's a lot of work, extra work. The initial system we discussed, the VAV system with the radiant floor heat, not the in-floor, but the hydronic around the registers, that's probably the most energy efficient that you can get that's well served everywhere. You'll see that in a lot of buildings and homes. And if you do the in-floor, it takes so long for the space to cool, it's hard to get that adjustment set right. When you do the perimeter, you've got a better chance of keeping the room's temperatures cooler. But we are going through Focus, and I think that is about a 30-day window is when we discussed it with Focus. The contract from start to get it going is about a 30-day window, so it's not 2 weeks. You got a little bit of time here. And I thought it was important that we get all of the information as precise as we can so that we can make the decisions. So I'm kind of deferring until we get the Focus, but my initial is the VAV cold and then the hydronic hot.
Anybody else?
The only item that I have, and I don't know if Beata or Sandy, Fred have anything else, but just a reminder that the county board amended the 2014 budget to allow for the expenditure of funds for this project to get it going. We amended the budget by $200,000 in 2014. We're on, at least at this point, on schedule for a bond resolution to come before the board. I'm shooting for April. I hope it can be April of this year for the initial bond resolution. If everything stays on track, it will be April. You know, there's some discussion that it may be May. So I don't want to be totally locked into April, but my goal is to get a resolution to the board in April for the initial bond resolution. Once the board approves that, then the process goes forward, and then within 90 days, I believe we would have we would actually have the sale of the bonds, and then a resolution, another resolution to come back to the board, probably in August, September, of accepting the sale of the bonds. Then cash would be available after that time period. So in between all that, we will most likely bring a resolution to the board, another resolution to allow for the additional expenditure of dollars. It will probably be a budget amendment of a certain amount in the neighborhood of $1 million, because we're not going to have funds available until the August, September timeframe. So everything is on track. That's kind of the schedule, but we probably will have to have another budget amendment, and then the 2015 budget allow for the continued expenditure of dollars. So we have the bond proceeds are available, then they will fund the remainder of the project, and they will punish in the expenditure of general fund dollars. That's kind of the scenario that we're at. We've had some expenditure of dollars, you know, to fund the conceptual design, pay the Accordion Elving firm for their dollars that have been set aside by the eventually that's all I have.
Agnes?
I have two questions or comments. In following up of what Rick talked about with the change in the, skilled nursing facility residents are likely more to be the kind of people that are also going to be in the assisted living. Are we updating our budget estimates for the operation? Because I do see this operationally as something, twice the size of what we are operating right now. And I think the trends that he hit on are really true. So are you making adjustments along the way or do you feel confident in those numbers? Because so much depends on it.
That's really,
go ahead, Sandy.
I'm really glad that you brought that up, because one of the things that we wanted to talk about today is that we have talked with Larry about a change in our forecast. Instead of it being just the compilation, we're going to really want to go to the examined forecast so that it helps validate the numbers, validate the consistency with other assisted or CBRFs, the staffing patterns, all of those things, to assure that we're doing it right and to validate those numbers. I don't know, Fred, did you have any more comments about the examine versus it is a little bit more money for us to do that with Larry, but feel that it's going to be valuable in the future and helping us do it right and get the right numbers together?
I don't have anything maybe to add specifically to the difference of the two reports, other than in the conversation that we had with Larry yesterday is they need about 30 days to complete the report. And so in order to stick with the early April or the April timeframe that Pat identified, really by the February meeting here, I think we have to be pretty close on the construction numbers and pretty close on operations. We've got a few details to work out there, as well as the assumptions. And I'm going to highlight one assumption that Larry referenced in his report is health insurance at a 1% increase sufficient? And so reviewing all of those set of assumptions with this committee to make sure everybody's on the same page and agrees with those assumptions, really we need to have things locked in as close as we can by that February 17th meeting.
No, I was going to just kind of say what Sandy just said, that Larry did the financial projections back in July of 2014, and as he reported here and at the county board, he needs to update those, validate those assumptions. He drills down even deeper into them and make sure that they're validated. There is a cost to do that, to have Whipley conduct that level of examination, but it's well worth it. It's well worth doing. I think it'll reassure the board as we prepare to bond for the project that the funding model is still solid, and it may need to be tweaked. I mean, I don't think our health insurance numbers are going to be 1%. We've had a couple good years, but if we're starting to forward out, I mean, we just met with the financial or the insurance consultants today, and we're looking at 5 years out. We're not going to have 1% increase. So those are examples of things that need to be examined.
So the other thing I wanted to bring up is we were talking about bonding. I really would like to hear at our next meeting a report on what other alternative funding sources might be looked at, and if that really is the right way to go, or if there's any grant, if we could cut that cost by $1 million, is it worth it? I just don't want that to go unexplored. If this is the right decision, I'm all for it. The numbers seem good on the face of it, but I think it's worthy of, I would just like to hear a report back.
Scott is here if you wanted him to talk about the fact that if we're using tax levy.
Well, the only way that you can commit your tax levy dollars in the future is through bond issue, general obligation bonds, and that the maximum limit on that possibly other avenues. Revenue bond, utility. County pledges some utility. Problem, other counties that I worked at, they looked at that and that because of the lack of tax lenders leave it for risk. Generally, bonds definitely.
And Beata and I will be attending some training on the CDBG grant applications so that we can assure that we can look at applying for those if we can.
Other questions?
I'll just
Okay,
comment on the CDBG grants, our community development block grants. The one thing that you need to be aware of in applying for these grants is that generally this is a matching fund. So if you are applying, if you have the ability to apply for $1 million grant, you're going to have to match that with $1 million. And there are timelines, and the other thing to consider in a CDBG grant is that these funds need to be administered, and they generally are not administered by the party who has received them. You're looking at an outside party to do the administration. So there are a lot of steps with CDBG grants that we all need to be aware of.
Yeah, I'd also be concerned about what the restrictions are for matching funds if we do get into that, because depending on what it's being used for, there's always going to be strings attached to how you can match the funds. For example, can we match the funds with general obligation bond, or do we have to come up with it some other way?
Monica, before it gets too late, would you pass that sheet around so we can get that signed for the... Right.
Yeah, I have one more question. Rick mentioned solar hot water would add $125,000 up front, but it'd be a 20-year payback. I think this building's going to be up for more than 20 years, and I think we're looking at it for 50. So therefore, the last 30 years, whoever's living in this county would be thanking us for having the foresight to go with that use of solar. And while the geothermal number of 600,000 plus is a bigger pill to swallow, that still has a payback. So how are we looking at this, and who's making this decision on whether it's worthwhile? If we have the funds, wouldn't we use them if it's a payback within that short of a cycle? I mean, this isn't just something we're building for 10 and then we're going to tear it down like a strip mall. This is something that's much longer lasting. So when does that decision get made?
Jim, you want to step in on that? Or?
Yeah, just to answer your question, we discussed this. In fact, I was asking if we did something smaller scale, just to cut the cost back a little bit, to do something, either PV or the solar hot water. The focus on energy, when we go through this with them, we'll be getting to that, so we'll know there'll also be some savings out there, some different grants we can get from them. So once we get that narrowed down a little bit more, I think what you're asking for is well within reason. It would come back to the committee, and you'd be able to add it in or not. But we're still looking at all of these options, and that certainly isn't off the table. And I don't know if we're going to have it in the grand scale or a smaller, but we definitely need to do something, is how I feel. So I think that you'll have your opportunity to vote on that after we discuss everything with Focus.
Pat? Okay, no further question to...
Our schedule has us completing the SD, the schematic design package, by Friday of this week. So that's why any of these fluctuations tends to have a ripple effect on what we're doing. And Tuan's kind of taken the brunt of getting that done. So we're going to be a little pressed. We've been a little bit distracted here. We're going to be a little tight to get all of the schematic elements done by Friday. I guess we'd like a couple extra days to finish those up next week. And I don't know, what do we, by Wednesday or something of next week maybe?
Would anybody on the committee have any objection if we gave them an extra week, considering all that we went through here? Seeing none, you got an extra week. Thanks, Rick.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
And then the last item is a stakeholder update. Sandy, are there any updates on the stakeholder community meetings?
The department managers are reviewing on February 10th some of the preliminary, design. And we will be working on a mock-up of the room, of the resident room for the nursing home, for the skilled facility. That will be we'll do a mock-up in probably the basement area so people can see it and, you know, look at it and see where things are. And so I think Jim has some of that plans and you guys do, and I just got them too, so, yeah.
We'll talk to Jim more about.
Yeah. So you'll be able to walk into the room and look where outlets are going to be and how the room's going to be set up, the size of the room, it'll be mocked up. It's called a mock-up room, which I think will be very helpful for everyone to be able to see and how it goes.
We'll spend a little time in that room, because we'll move things around, we'll bring in staff, and we'll talk about where things should be, and so it'll evolve a little bit, and usually we have something that people can comment on, so we can come into the room, they can say, you get us to this, I like it, I don't, whatever. So that's, it's a really useful tool, and it really helps everyone understand what we're doing.
And then we have another general plan review on February 19th, and then the ad hoc meets again on February 24th.
Okay, at this time, we can call the meeting adjourned at